Hello, my name is Jeremy Houck, and I'd like to thank you for making the choice to join us here at the Greenbrier Church Online. As we begin today, I'd like for you to take a moment and think about how would you describe the perfect family? Maybe said in a different way, when you're on social media and you're trying to project this idea that you have the perfect family, what do you want to reveal and what do you try to hide? Think about it for a moment. When we go to social media, what kind of pictures do we see? I know that when I'm on social media, normally what I see are families that are enjoying hanging out together at the beach or at the pool or around the campfire. People post pictures of their adorable babies that have always slept through the night. They're not fussy eaters, and they were self potty trained by the time they were 18 months old. I see people post pictures of their teenagers who never have a bad attitude. They made all A's on the report card again, and they would rather hang out with mom and dad than hide in their bedrooms playing video games. I see people post videos and pictures of their grandmothers singing with their granddaughters as they spend time together in the kitchen, passing down family recipes, or grandfathers running around the yard throwing a baseball with their kids and grandkids. It doesn't take you very long of scrolling through social media to kind of look at your own family, your own life, and get a little depressed. Deep down, you know there is a huge difference between what we see on these screens and what people are actually experiencing in life. But we still find ourselves longing for the lives that we see other people living, which causes us to feel some guilt and some anxiety. But according to the latest research by Jessica Stillman, everything is not what it appears. In her research, she discovered that the more miserable a person is, the happier their social media posts become. The truth is, there's no such thing as the perfect family or the perfect life. Every family has more than enough problems and struggles. It doesn't matter if you grew up in a wonderful Christian home with loving parents or if you grew up in a terrible family that you just couldn't wait to get out of. Every family has a dark side. Every family has a side that they would never post on social media. Because even though we all want to portray this dream picture of mom, dad, the kids, a dog, a cat, and a house with a white picket fence, it's all purely fantasy. Because the truth is that every family is a dysfunctional family. As we continue to read through the Bible, and we discover all kinds of families that have their own struggles with dysfunction. There are dysfunctional families, there are dysfunctional marriages on almost every page because when you boil it all down, the real cause of dysfunction is sin. I mean, the first dysfunctional family was Adam and Eve, and every family since then has struggled with dysfunction from some degree or another. Over the last few weeks, we looked at Abraham, a great man of faith, but he wasn't perfect. He was slow to follow God. He lied about his wife. And when Sarah becomes unable to conceive a child, he agrees to sleep with her maidservant Hagar. And then he lies about his wife again. Abraham and Sarah finally have a boy, but Isaac isn't any better than his dad. He struggles with his relationship with God. He even kept the family tradition about lying that his wife was his sister. Eventually, Isaac and Rebekah have two boys, but Isaac had a favorite son. Isaac wasn't like the grandfather who once told me, I love all of my grandchildren, I just love some more than others. Isaac preferred Esau, the oldest, over the baby. Isaac and Rebekah have a beautiful family that really seemed to put the fun in dysfunctional. Let's quickly kind of make our way through their family history. If you know the story from Genesis 25, you'll remember that because Esau was born first, he was supposed to get the birthright, and that entitled him to twice as much inheritance as his brother. But for everything that Esau possesses in physical strength and ability, he seems to lack in mental strength and foresight and understanding. One day, Esau comes home from a hunting trip and he's exhausted and he's tired. And lo and behold, little brother Jacob is in the house and he's cooked a pot of stew that smells really good. Esau asks for a bowl of stew, and Jacob says, "You know what? I'll give you some, but let's trade stew for the birthright." And Esau, being short sighted, said, "If I die from hunger, I'll never be able to enjoy the birthright, so you can have it." And they shake hands on it, and Jacob gets the birthright. Years later, in Genesis 27, when Isaac is about to die, he makes the decision that Esau is going to receive the blessing because Esau is his favorite. But God had already said before Jacob and Esau were ever born that the older would serve the younger. It was God's plan that Jacob would be treated as the firstborn, but Isaac's not willing to accept God's choice. He's determined that because he favored Esau, Esau would get the blessing. So he comes up with this plan about how all of this is going to work out. But Rebecca learned of the plan and she came up with one of her own. And we see that this deception and this dysfunction is a family trait. She tells her son Jacob to go out and to kill a couple goats while Esau is out hunting for wild game. Rebecca cooks up this tasty meal that Jacob is going to serve to Esau or Isaac while pretending to be Esau the brother. Jacob uses some goat skins to fool Isaac into thinking he was hairy like his brother Esau, and Rebecca told him to lower his voice a little bit, and they made it smell like he's been outside. And it's really a pretty good plan since Isaac is old and can't see. But do you see how messed up this family was? Can't you just see the dysfunction pouring out from every single side? Everybody in the family is trying to deceive everybody else, trying to get the things to turn out the way that they want them to turn out. Nobody's going to post that family on social media. What we discover is that the plan works. Jacob gets the birthright and the blessing. Esau, well, he gets angry enough to kill his little brother. So Jacob leaves home in a hurry, and when we get to Genesis 29, we discover that Jacob has gone back to mom's hometown. And there he meets the girl of his dreams. Her name is Rachel. She is gorgeous. He falls head over heels in love with her, and Rachel takes Jacob home to meet her family. Sociologists say that dysfunctional people have a way of attracting other dysfunctional people. In fact, one author I read said that dysfunctional people are kind of like dysfunctional magnets. And just because Jacob is new in town, that doesn't mean that things have really changed. Jacob gets involved with Rachel's dad, Laban, and they're like two peas in a dysfunctional pod. At first, Laban seems to be like a stand up guy who has a beautiful daughter and another daughter. Jacob is deeply in love with Rebekah, and he offers to work as a servant for 7 years to pay his dowry so that they could be married. And in one of the most romantic passages in all of the Bible, we read, "And those 7 years seemed like just a few days to him because he loved Rachel very much." After 7 years of toil and hard work, we finally get to the wedding day. Now, maybe everything in Jacob's life is going to be perfect. And if you think that, you don't really know the story. Remember, dysfunctional people have a way of attracting other dysfunctional people. On the wedding day, the bride is all dressed up, and Jacob believes that Laban is a man of his word. But he's not. Laban switches his daughter. He gives Jacob Leah, not Rachel. Not the daughter with the beautiful figure and the lovely face. He gives Jacob the other daughter, Leah. We read that when it's dark, Laban gets his daughter Leah, brings her to the marriage bed, and Jacob sleeps with her. It's not until Jacob wakes up the next morning that he discovers that he's not spent the night with the love of his life, but with his sister. Jacob protests, but there's really not much he can do. The deceiver has been deceived. But Laban makes him an offer. He says that in this country, the oldest daughter has to be married first, but what he offers is for Jacob to spend a honeymoon week with Leah, and then he will give him another honeymoon week with Rachel. It's just going to cost him 7 more years of labor. So Jacob finally gets the woman of his dreams, but he still doesn't have his happy ever after. Even though it was Rachel that he really loved, it's Leah who gets pregnant and has children. She has 4 sons. Rachel can't stand it, so she gets Jacob to sleep with her maidservant, and they have 2 sons through the maidservant. In response, Leah gets Jacob to sleep with her maidservant, and there's another 2 sons born. And then the story gets even weirder because Leah makes a bargain with Rachel over some fruit, over some mandrakes. And then she sleeps with Jacob again and has another 2 sons and then a daughter. And there are 10 kids running around the house before Rachel finally has 2 children of her own. And just when you think the situation can't get any worse, we discover that the family is getting bigger, but they're not getting healthier. Look with me in chapter 30. Jacob became very wealthy with large flocks of sheep and goats, female and male servants, and many camels and donkeys. Sounds like things are really beginning to turn around for him, right? But the next verse says, "But Jacob soon learned that Laban's sons were grumbling about him. Jacob has robbed our father of everything," they said. "He's gained all his wealth at our father's expense." And Jacob began to notice a change in Laban's attitude towards him. So now you got these 2 deceivers who've spent all of these years together. They've spent so much time together that they don't trust each other. There are all these false accusations flying around about Jacob. I would imagine that when Jacob first left home, when he ran away after stealing the blessing, he probably thought, "I'm so glad to be out of that house. Now I can finally have a normal life." But then he marries into this family only to discover that it's just as dysfunctional as his first family. Does that sound familiar? Most people believe that once they leave home, when they leave their family behind and their childhood problems behind, that life is going to be better. It doesn't take them long to discover that they're going to experience similar problems, similar relationship patterns long after they've left that old family environment because, well, wherever you go, you take you with you. Everything that made you, everything that formed you and shaped you, all of that stuff from your background follows you until you figure out how to deal with it. I told you, every family is a dysfunctional family. Every one of us are burdened with our own stuff and stuff that will eventually affect every family that we're a part of. I mention that because I often hear people say, "Well, I'm from a dysfunctional family," and they use that as an excuse for their bad behavior. But every family is a dysfunctional family. So we just ignore the lives that we see on social media because even the people in the pictures are living in a dysfunctional family. Everybody that uses the hashtag best life ever is broken, flawed, and sinful. And so are their families. In fact, we could take that idea out another step and admit that every church is a dysfunctional family. And I say that because the church is made up of great sinners who need a greater Savior. Every church is made up of people who are not loved by God because they're good people, but rather they're people who are striving to be good because they realize the depth of God's love for them. And that's the point of grace, especially in the midst of all of this dysfunction. Grace is found in the fact that no matter how dysfunctional we are, God can function in our dysfunction. We've kind of rushed through the life of Jacob today, but I want to draw your attention to what God says to Jacob in Genesis 31:3. Then the Lord said to Jacob, "Return to the land of your father and grandfather and to your relatives there, and I will be with you." Jacob comes from a long history of dysfunction. And here's the point that I don't want you to miss. There has never been a dysfunctional family that was able to stop God from functioning. Our dysfunction never stopped God from working, never stopped God from blessing us, never stopped God from working through our family, no matter how dysfunctional we were. God speaks to Jacob in the midst of his dysfunction. He doesn't wait for Jacob to get his life together. He doesn't wait for Jacob to figure it all out. God speaks to him in the middle of his mess because our perfect God works through imperfect people. Our holy God speaks to and works through unholy people because that's the only type of people there are. Everyone is dysfunctional, and God has the power to function in the midst of our dysfunction. That's the beauty of the gospel. So don't let your failures define you. Make your failure serve you. Use it. Grow from it. Spiritual growth is learning to see God in the middle of your dysfunction. James Boyce wrote, "If you understand those two words, but God, they will save your soul. And if you recall them daily and live by them, they will transform your life completely." There are terrible things that have happened to me in my life, but God. I grew up in a family that was dysfunctional, that abused me and mistreated me, but God. My boss and my coworkers are making my life miserable, but God. I am in the middle of a terrible mess, but God. We need to learn to view our lives through this understanding of but God. I mean, how long are you going to let your dysfunctional family make you a slave? How long are you going to hide behind that mess that you were born into? How long are you going to allow the dysfunction of your past to drive the rest of your life? Because no matter how bad things have been for you, that doesn't have to describe you because God can do something great in you. God is able to function in our dysfunction. The question is, will we choose to allow him to do that? This entire world is dysfunctional because of sin. All of us are flawed and broken. And God's solution was to send his perfect, sinless, only begotten Son into this world to take all of that mess, all of that sin on his shoulders so that God can welcome us into heaven. That's God functioning at the height of our dysfunction. And that's the offer that he makes to each and every one of us as he invites us to his table. He invites us to come just as we are, to bring every piece of baggage that we own. Because if we come to the table and we're willing to confess our struggles and our dysfunction, then we'll be able to see God making a masterpiece out of the mess that we've made. If we're willing to trust that God loves us and accept his offer of grace and mercy through baptism, God promises to forgive us and to make us new people. He will change us. I know you've had a checkered past, but God is willing to come into your life and to give you a better future. And that's how we come to understand that we can live lives of righteousness in the midst of our brokenness. It's all because we choose to allow God to come in and to save us from our dysfunction and our sin. I really hope and pray that you have a wonderful time around the table today. Never forget how deeply you're loved, and I look forward to seeing you very soon.